It was supposed to be a morning filled with joy, sunlight breaking through the clouds, laughter echoing from the bridal suite, and a city waking up to love in its purest form. But that morning in Toronto would soon become something else entirely. Hours before she was meant to walk down the aisle, Emily Donovan, a 29-year-old bride-to-be, vanished. No witnesses. No struggle. No goodbye. One moment she was there, her white dress waiting in its box, her bouquet carefully arranged by her best friend, and the next, she was gone. At first, everyone thought it was nerves. Maybe she needed space, a moment to breathe before taking a step that would change her life forever. But as time passed and the hours stretched into a full day, unease began to settle in. Her phone was off. Her car was missing. Her last message to her mother simply read, "Almost there." She never arrived. By the next morning, whispers started. Friends called hospitals. Family begged for news. And when her car was found 3 days later near Lake Ontario, doors locked, keys still inside, and her wedding bouquet untouched on the passenger seat, those whispers turned into fear. What happened to Emily Donovan on the morning of her wedding day? Did she walk away from everything she knew, or did someone make sure she never reached the altar? Because what investigators would soon uncover in the weeks that followed about her fiancé, her past, and the quiet secrets she carried would shake Toronto to its core. And yet, even now, years later, one question still haunts everyone who remembers that morning: was Emily trying to escape something, or someone? If you're drawn to real stories where every clue matters and every silence hides a truth, make sure you subscribe and stay with us, because this is one case that refuses to let go. Toronto is a city that never sleeps, a city built on dreams, lights, and stories of people chasing something better. But behind the calm rhythm of its streets, behind the glass towers and quiet suburbs, there are stories that never make sense, stories that refuse to fade. One of them is the disappearance of Emily Donovan, the young woman whose wedding day turned into a mystery that still hangs over the city like a shadow. Emily lived in a quiet neighborhood in North York, a place where people left their doors unlocked and smiled at one another in passing. She was a teacher, loved by her students, admired by her neighbors. Her wedding had been planned down to every detail: the flowers, the cake, the venue overlooking the lake. She was meant to become Mrs. Emily Matthews that afternoon. Instead, by morning, she had vanished. The case struck people because it didn't fit the usual pattern. There was no sign of trouble, no warning, no cry for help. One camera caught her leaving her apartment that morning, her dress bag over her shoulder, her expression calm. She got into her car. The next camera that should have seen her pass by never did. Somewhere between her condo parking lot and the salon, she disappeared from every lens, every witness, every trace of normal life. What makes this story more chilling is how ordinary it all was until it wasn't. Her street was safe. The city was busy with the weekend crowd. Nothing pointed to danger. But by sunset, her phone went straight to voicemail, her fiancé was pacing in a suit, guests waited in confusion, and her mother's voice trembled through countless unanswered calls. Then came the inconsistencies, the things that didn't add up. Police reports conflicted with statements. Timelines blurred. Some claimed they saw her car near the lake hours before it was reported missing. Others swore they heard shouting in the underground parking lot early that morning. None of it was confirmed, yet every piece fed a growing storm of speculation. People wanted to believe it was cold feet, that maybe Emily had second thoughts and ran away to start fresh. But her bank account hadn't moved. Her passport was still at home. Her credit cards untouched. No signs of a plan. And those closest to her said she was excited, even glowing, the night before, no hint of fear or regret. The investigation would soon uncover secrets that didn't belong in love stories. There were old messages, deleted photos, unspoken tensions between families. Behind the wedding smiles and vows yet to be said, there were questions no one dared to ask, questions that might explain why a woman with everything ahead of her never made it to her own wedding. Because as detectives dug deeper into the hours before her disappearance, it became clear, Emily didn't just vanish. Something or someone made sure she wouldn't be found. And the closer they got to the truth, the more they began to realize that this wasn't a simple case of a runaway bride. It was the beginning of something far more complicated, and much darker than anyone was ready to admit. Emily Donovan was the kind of person people described as gentle, the kind who made others feel calm just by being around. She taught elementary school, always carrying a soft smile and a notebook filled with half-written poems. Her students adored her, her neighbors said she was kind, and her friends claimed she never had a bad word to say about anyone. Yet behind that calm exterior, there were fragments of a life that, once pieced together, revealed how fragile her world truly was. She had met Ryan Matthews 3 years before her disappearance. He was a quiet man, steady, almost too steady, a software engineer who preferred order over chaos. They met at a friend's birthday dinner. She laughed easily, and he barely spoke, but they ended up walking home together. From that night on, they were inseparable. Friends would later say they looked perfect together, though some admitted there was something distant about Ryan, like he was always holding something back. Still, he loved her in his own quiet way, or at least that's what everyone believed. Ryan was the one who planned most of the wedding. He chose the venue, managed the guest list, and handled the finances. Emily trusted him with almost everything. She told her best friend Claire that she felt lucky, that Ryan gave her stability she never had growing up. But there were small moments, little hesitations, unfinished sentences that Claire later remembered too well. Like when Emily once joked about how Ryan hates surprises, and then immediately looked down, as if she'd said something she shouldn't have. Her mother, Lydia Donovan, was the opposite of Ryan, loud, emotional, and unafraid of speaking her mind. She raised Emily alone after her husband left when Emily was just a teenager. The two were close, but there was always a quiet ache in Lydia's voice whenever her daughter mentioned her father. Lydia hadn't seen him in over a decade, but she said Emily had recently tried to reach out to him again. Nobody knew why. Detective Alan Rees, the man who would later take charge of Emily's case, was known throughout Toronto for his patience and composure. A man who'd seen more disappearances than he could count, he'd learned to read people by the smallest details: a nervous twitch, a delay before answering, a misplaced memory. When he first read Emily's file, he thought it would be a simple case, a runaway bride story that would end with a phone call from another city. But as days turned into weeks, he began to sense something heavier beneath the surface. Then there was Claire Nguyen, Emily's maid of honor and closest friend since university. She was the one who noticed the small changes before anyone else: how Emily started avoiding phone calls, how she deleted old social media posts, how she seemed to flinch whenever her wedding was brought up. Claire told police that the last time she saw Emily, she hugged her a little too tight and whispered, "If anything feels wrong tomorrow, don't go through with it." She didn't know why she said it. She just felt she had to. When the official investigation began to lose steam, Lydia hired Marcus Lyle, a private investigator who'd built his career finding missing adults. Marcus had a reputation for being stubborn, willing to cross lines the police wouldn't. He retraced Emily's last known steps, spoke to witnesses the detectives had overlooked, and claimed he found something odd about the timeline. He believed Emily's disappearance didn't start at the parking lot, or even the salon she never reached. He believed it started days earlier, with a phone call Emily made that no one could trace. As each person's story unfolded, the picture became more tangled. Emily, the bride who vanished. Ryan, the groom with answers that never seemed to match. Lydia, the mother who refused to stop searching. Claire, the friend burdened by guilt. And Detective Rees, the man trying to keep truth and emotion from blurring together. Each one held a piece of what happened that morning, and each one, in some way, was hiding something. Because the closer investigators looked, the more it became clear that Emily Donovan's disappearance wasn't a random act or a simple case of a runaway heart. It was something personal. Something planned. And somewhere within the circle of people who claimed to love her most, someone knew exactly what happened and why she never made it to the altar. At 7:15 that morning, Emily Donovan was seen leaving her North York condo. Neighbors would later tell police she looked calm, her hair tied back, holding a small travel bag in one hand and her phone in the other. She waved at the building concierge like she always did. Nothing seemed strange. The security camera caught her entering the elevator, pressing the ground floor button, and walking out of view. At 7:23, her white Honda Civic was recorded exiting the underground parking garage. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. The plan for the morning was simple. Emily was supposed to stop by the salon downtown to get her hair and makeup done before heading to the hotel where her bridesmaids were waiting. She had spoken with her stylist, confirming the 8:30 appointment. Everything was on schedule. At 8:02, her mother Lydia received a call. Emily's voice was steady, soft. She said she was almost there. Lydia later described it as an ordinary conversation, except for one thing: Emily hung up too quickly, as if something had caught her attention. She didn't say goodbye. That was the last time anyone heard her voice. By 8:35, the stylist began to worry. Emily had never been late to anything, not even casual meetups. Calls went unanswered. Texts stayed unread. By 9:15, Claire, her maid of honor, tried calling too, assuming the morning nerves had set in. By 10 a.m., when guests started asking why the bride wasn't at the hotel, the laughter and music around the preparations began to fade. Something wasn't right. Ryan Matthews, the groom, kept insisting it had to be cold feet. He told everyone she'd call soon, that maybe she needed space before the ceremony. But those who knew Emily refused to believe it. They said she wasn't the kind of person to vanish, especially not like this, not without a word, not without reason. Her mother called the police by noon. At first, the report was treated lightly. Adults leave sometimes, the officer said. Maybe she'll show up by evening. She didn't. For 3 days, the search spread across Toronto, flyers on street poles, interviews with locals, police dogs tracing trails that ended near the waterfront. Then, on the third morning, a patrol officer spotted a white Honda Civic parked by the edge of a quiet access road near Lake Ontario. The doors were locked. The windows slightly fogged. Inside, the bouquet Emily was supposed to carry down the aisle sat untouched on the passenger seat, the flowers slightly wilted. Her purse was on the floor, but her phone was missing. The engine was cold, suggesting the car had been there since the day she vanished. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood, no fingerprints out of place, no forced entry. It looked as though she had parked, stepped out, and simply walked away. But from what, and toward where? Detective Rees examined the scene carefully. He found faint shoe prints in the dirt leading toward the lake, then fading near the pier. The pattern matched the heels Emily had been wearing that morning: beige, medium height, simple design. The track stopped just before the wooden boards of the dock. After that, nothing. A fisherman later came forward, saying he had been out on the water early that same morning. Around 6:30 or 7 a.m., he saw a woman standing near the edge of the pier, staring out over the lake. She wasn't moving, just standing there, her dress fluttering slightly in the breeze. He didn't think much of it at the time. People came there often to watch the sunrise. But when he saw Emily's photo on the news days later, he said his heart stopped. He swore it was her. If his story was true, it meant Emily was at the pier before her call to her mother. But that didn't make sense. She told Lydia she was almost there, referring to the salon, not the lake. Investigators rechecked timestamps, phone records, and camera footage from nearby streets. There were gaps everywhere, a missing 12 minutes between the garage exit and the next intersection camera. No one could explain how her car got to the lake unnoticed, or why it appeared she had gone there willingly. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. What was Emily doing by the water on her wedding day? Who was she meeting? And why did her last known movements look so deliberate, so calm, as though she wasn't running from danger, but walking straight into it? As news spread, the city grew obsessed. Some believed she had drowned. Others thought she had escaped an abusive relationship. And a few whispered something even stranger, that Emily had uncovered something in the days before her wedding, something she couldn't ignore, and that someone had made sure her silence stayed permanent. No one knew the truth yet, but one thing was clear: Emily Donovan didn't just vanish. Her disappearance was part of a chain of events carefully hidden beneath the surface. And for the people closest to her, especially Ryan Matthews, that was only the beginning of their nightmare. Detective Alan Rees sat behind his cluttered desk, watching the steady rain blur the windowpane as if the city itself wanted to wash away another mystery. He had seen hundreds of disappearances, some clean, some chaotic, but something about Emily Donovan's case didn't sit right. From the first day, the whole thing smelled too neat. No broken locks. No signs of panic. A bouquet sitting perfectly upright on the car seat, as if waiting for its owner to return. Ryan Matthews, the groom, had been calm, too calm, Alan thought. His eyes darted only when he mentioned the argument about Emily's ex. It wasn't serious, he had said. She just got upset that I didn't trust her. But his hands had trembled when he said her name. He told police he last saw her around midnight, after she stormed out of their apartment following the argument. He assumed she had gone to clear her head before the big day. But her car leaving her own condo hours later contradicted that story. The police initially treated it as a simple missing person case. Emily was an adult. Adults sometimes disappear. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe the pressure had been too much. But when her car turned up 3 days later near the lake, doors locked, her wedding bouquet lying on the passenger seat like a ghost of the day that never came, those simple explanations crumbled. Alan ordered forensics to sweep the vehicle. They found no foreign fingerprints, no blood, no clear struggle. Yet, in the back seat, tangled near the floor mat, they discovered a single strand of hair. It didn't belong to Emily. It was long, dark, and coarse, different from Emily's light brown curls. That small detail set off a quiet alarm in the detective's mind. When Emily's phone records came in, the timeline grew even more confusing. Her last outgoing call was to her mother at 8:02 a.m., saying she was almost there. The stylist never saw her. The cell tower ping placed her phone near the Gardiner Expressway, nowhere near the salon. Then the trail went cold. The media soon took hold of the story and twisted it into something unrecognizable. The headlines screamed about a runaway bride, a young woman who couldn't face marriage. Talk shows speculated that she'd faked her own disappearance for attention. Online forums became a battleground, half pointing fingers at Ryan, calling him a manipulator, the other half painting Emily as unstable, even deceitful. But Emily's mother, Lydia Donovan, refused to let her daughter become a public spectacle. She went on every network that would listen. Her trembling hands clutched old photographs, her voice breaking as she pleaded for answers. Emily would never run away. She was excited about her wedding. She sent me a poem she wrote for her vows just days before she vanished. Her words ignited public sympathy, and within a week, the hashtag #FindEmily began trending. Detective Rees, though, wasn't one for hashtags. He worked facts, not noise. Still, he couldn't ignore what Lydia said, especially when the private investigator she hired, Marcus Lyle, called him late one night with something disturbing. Marcus had dug into Emily's personal life, the kind of things police might overlook. He found out that Emily had been attending therapy sessions at a discreet clinic in Midtown. Her therapist, bound by confidentiality, said little but did confirm Emily had been struggling with anxiety. The session started right after an old boyfriend, Aaron Briggs, reached out to her again. Aaron was a name Rees didn't yet have on his list. He quickly found out that he and Emily had dated years earlier, but things had ended badly. A restraining order had once been filed, then quietly dropped. Aaron lived 2 hours north, in Barrie, working at a garage. When Rees questioned him, Aaron appeared startled but calm. He claimed he hadn't seen Emily in years. She texted me once last month, he admitted, just to say she hoped I was doing okay. That was all. Something in his tone didn't sit right. Rees noticed how Aaron's hands stayed shoved in his pockets the entire time, how his voice faltered slightly when he said her name. But there was no evidence tying him to anything. No cell tower pings. No sightings. Meanwhile, Ryan Matthews's story began to fracture under pressure. Phone records showed that at 1 a.m., hours after Emily had supposedly stormed out, he'd called her twice and left no messages. Then, at 2:17 a.m., his phone connected briefly to a tower near her condo. He claimed he'd gone there to see if she was home, but her building security footage didn't show his car entering. Either he parked nearby, or he lied. By now, the case had stretched 2 weeks with no trace of Emily. Search parties combed the lake area, volunteers trudging through mud and rain. Dogs picked up her scent near the pier where the fishermen claimed to have seen a woman matching her description at dawn, standing alone, staring at the water. But the scent stopped abruptly near the rocks. As if she'd vanished into the lake, or been taken away by someone who knew what they were doing. Detective Rees replayed every possible route she could have taken, from her condo to the salon. The city was full of cameras, yet there was no footage after 7:23 a.m. when her car left the garage. It was as if the roads had swallowed her. Then the first real crack appeared. A traffic camera on a back road near the lake picked up a blurry image of a silver sedan matching Emily's car around 7:50 a.m., but another vehicle followed close behind, almost tailing it. A black SUV, tinted windows, no license plate visible. Rees ordered a deep scan of all nearby cameras, hoping to trace that SUV. Hours of footage led to nothing, until a parking lot camera outside an abandoned marina showed it again, parked beside a row of storage units. The timestamp read 8:11 a.m., just minutes after Emily's last call to her mother. Something happened at that marina. When police went there days later, they found tire marks and faint footprints near the shoreline. The ground had been disturbed, as if something heavy had been dragged. Divers searched the water for days, finding nothing. But everyone could feel it now, the quiet dread that Emily Donovan was no longer missing. She was gone. Lydia refused to believe it. She launched fundraisers, hired billboards, begged for tips. Ryan appeared beside her in a few interviews, hollow-eyed and subdued, but many couldn't shake the feeling that his sorrow seemed too controlled. One night, an anonymous tip came in. The caller claimed to have seen Ryan near the lake the morning Emily disappeared. Rees brought him back in for questioning. Ryan denied everything. "I loved her," he said softly. "Why would I hurt her?" But love, as Rees knew too well, was often the motive hiding beneath the neatest lies. Then came another twist. Marcus Lyle, the private investigator, found out that Emily's withdrawn $8,000 had been deposited in cash into another account just 2 days after she vanished. The account was registered under a fake name. And when traced, it led to a prepaid phone used to contact Aaron Briggs. The pattern was forming, one full of half-truths, money trails, and ghosts of old relationships. Yet still, no Emily. And as Detective Rees sat staring at the rain-soaked city map pinned with red markers showing every last known movement, one thought clawed at his mind: someone out there knew exactly what happened to her, and they were watching every step he took. The more Detective Rees dug into Emily's life, the stranger everything became. Nothing about her disappearance followed the usual rhythm. There was no ransom call, no sudden digital trail, no sightings that could be trusted. Everything about her last days seemed to whisper of something hidden, something she had been trying to outrun. When the therapist's notes finally came through, the truth began to take a darker shape. Emily had been visiting Dr. Paula Kessler for nearly 6 months. At first, the sessions had centered on pre-wedding anxiety, but over time, her words changed tone. She spoke about a secret, something she wasn't ready to share even with those closest to her. The therapist wrote that Emily had grown increasingly fearful, mentioning several times that she felt she was being followed. She never named who. The last entry in her file, written just 5 days before the wedding, read simply: "Patient appears exhausted. Recurrent dreams of drowning. Expresses guilt and fear of consequence. Rees sat with that note for a long time. Guilt and consequence. Two words that carried more weight than any clue. Around the same time, new evidence began to tear Ryan's story apart. Security footage recovered from a traffic camera near Lake Ontario showed his car passing at 8:24 a.m. the morning Emily vanished, barely 20 minutes after her last phone call. He had told police he was home all morning, waiting for her call. When confronted, Ryan said he had gone out searching for her after she didn't show up at the salon. But the timestamps made no sense. He would have had to leave before anyone even knew she was missing. Rees watched the footage over and over. The black SUV from earlier was there too, visible for just 2 frames before disappearing onto the next road. The inconsistencies kept piling up. Claire Nguyen, Emily's maid of honor and best friend, finally broke down during her second interview. She admitted that Emily had confided serious doubts about the wedding in the weeks before. "She told me she thought she made a mistake," Claire said quietly, her hands twisting together. "She said she still loved Ryan but, she didn't trust him anymore. She said he'd changed." Claire also recalled that Emily had been nervous about a car parked outside her condo. A dark SUV, always in a slightly different spot. She joked that maybe it belonged to a private investigator, but her laugh hadn't sounded real. 2 days after that interview, a fisherman reported seeing a man and a woman arguing near the pier around sunrise the morning Emily disappeared. The woman, he said, had been wearing something white. He thought it might have been a dress or veil. He couldn't see the man's face clearly, but he remembered his posture, tall, slightly hunched forward, like he was trying to get her to listen. The argument lasted less than a minute before both disappeared from view. When the fisherman heard the news later, he realized who the woman must have been. A search of the area turned up something small but haunting, a torn piece of lace snagged on a rusty fence post. Forensics confirmed it matched Emily's veil. The pressure around the case intensified. The public devoured every update. True crime bloggers uploaded theories by the hour, some saying Emily had run to escape a toxic relationship, others claiming Ryan had snapped in a moment of rage. A few darker corners of the internet began whispering about cults, rituals, even government cover-ups. Everyone wanted to solve the mystery, but no one really could. Then came a twist that took the investigation into deeper water. Emily's estranged father, Patrick Donovan, suddenly became part of the picture. He'd left her and Lydia years earlier, after a messy divorce and rumors of gambling debts. No one had seen him in years. But phone records showed he had reached out to Emily 3 weeks before she vanished. The messages were short, desperate, almost cryptic. "We need to meet before it's too late. You don't know what you're walking into. He's not who you think he is." Emily had replied once, "Please stop contacting me." Detective Rees tried to track Patrick down, but it was as if he had vanished too. His apartment was empty. His landlord said he'd left suddenly, taking nothing but a small suitcase. His bank account hadn't been touched since the week Emily disappeared. The case had become a web of ghosts, each lead fading just as another appeared. Rees began to suspect there was something connecting all of them, something buried deeper than a lover's quarrel or a runaway bride. He went back to the financial records. The $8,000 Emily withdrew still bothered him. She hadn't been wealthy, and that money wasn't small change. He wondered if she'd planned to pay someone off, or escape something. When analysts dug further, they discovered another oddity. In the days before her disappearance, she'd made several online searches about missing persons, how long before police start looking, and how to change your name in Canada. That made the public lean toward the runaway theory again. But Rees couldn't ignore the sense of fear that surrounded every clue. This wasn't the pattern of someone escaping love. It felt more like someone escaping danger. Then one night, while combing through interview footage, Rees noticed something subtle. During Ryan's second interrogation, when shown a photo of Patrick Donovan, his eyes flicked, just a fraction, before he caught himself. He claimed not to recognize him, but the body language said otherwise. The next day, Rees called Marcus Lyle, the private investigator. Marcus had been digging through Patrick's background and found that Patrick once worked as a subcontractor for a construction firm owned by none other than Ryan's uncle. The connection was buried under years of business paperwork, but it was there. It wasn't impossible they'd crossed paths. Lydia was called in for another interview. She looked pale, exhausted, her once steady voice reduced to whispers. "Patrick came to see me 2 months before the wedding," she confessed. "He said he had information about Ryan, something that could ruin the marriage. I didn't believe him. I thought he was drunk or desperate for attention." She paused, her hands trembling. "Now I don't know what to believe anymore." As the days passed, the investigation felt like chasing shadows. Ryan's lawyer began pushing back hard, accusing the police of harassment. But every piece of evidence kept pointing him closer to the lake, to that black SUV, to the strange connection between his family and Patrick Donovan. Then something unexpected broke the silence. Late one night, a homeless man came to the precinct claiming he'd found a purse washed up near the shore. Inside, a driver's license, some cash, and a locket. It was Emily's. Inside the locket were 2 tiny photos, one of her mother, and one of her father. No sign of Ryan. For Detective Rees, it felt like a message, one last clue from someone who knew her world was closing in. And as the night deepened, rain hammering against the station windows, one thought refused to leave his mind: Emily Donovan hadn't simply vanished. She had been trying to tell them something, right until the end. And someone, somewhere, had made sure her secret stayed buried. 3 years passed. The posters had faded from lampposts, the social media hashtags had grown cold, and yet the name Emily Donovan still carried weight in Toronto. For her mother, Lydia, the wound never healed; for Detective Rees, it never stopped bleeding. He had closed dozens of cases since, but this one, the one that slipped through his hands, kept him awake at night. Every detail still echoed in his mind. The missing cash, the car by the lake, the locket, the messages that never made sense. Then, one ordinary afternoon in late summer, everything changed. A construction crew working near the west dock of Lake Ontario unearthed a rusted, mud-stained phone buried beneath concrete debris. It was found less than 200 meters from where Emily's car had been discovered 3 years earlier. At first, the workers thought nothing of it, but when the device was cleaned and logged, its serial number matched one already in the police database: Emily Donovan's missing phone. Forensic experts spent weeks recovering fragments from the corroded memory chip. Most files were gone, destroyed by water and time. But a few survived, enough to shift the entire investigation. Among the recovered data were 2 unsent text messages, both written on the morning of her disappearance. The first read, "He knows everything." The second, timestamped just 12 minutes later, said, "I can't go through with this." Those 7 words sent shockwaves through the case. The first implied exposure, the second hesitation. But exposure of what? To whom? The messages were traced to have been typed between 7:49 and 8:01 a.m., minutes before Emily's last call to her mother. There was no record of who he was. But for Detective Rees, the pieces began to fit in grim alignment. The evidence that once seemed thin now began to form a pattern: Ryan's inconsistent timeline, his presence near the lake, the argument seen by the fisherman, and the resurfacing of Patrick Donovan. The phone gave prosecutors enough momentum to reopen the case. By winter, Ryan Matthews was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The city erupted once again. Cameras lined the courthouse steps, and every true crime podcaster from Toronto to Montreal seemed to have an opinion. Ryan maintained his innocence from the beginning. He walked into court calm, groomed, dressed in dark suits that made him appear smaller somehow, fragile under the lights. He said he had loved Emily, that her disappearance destroyed his life. But prosecutors painted a different story: that Ryan, fearing Emily was going to cancel the wedding and expose something he had been hiding, confronted her at the lake. They argued, it turned violent, and he panicked. Without a body, the case rested on motive, opportunity, and emotion. Witnesses filled the courtroom for months. Friends. Neighbors. Even the fisherman took the stand, his voice trembling as he described the memory that had haunted him since that dawn. Claire Gwynn broke down as she read aloud one of Emily's last texts to her. "If anything feels off tomorrow, promise me you won't ignore it." But the defense countered everything with precision. They claimed the phone could have been planted, that anyone could have sent those texts, and that the police had built a case from suspicion, not proof. They reminded the jury that no body was ever found, no trace of blood, no direct evidence linking Ryan to a crime. They portrayed Emily as a woman overwhelmed by pressure, her therapy sessions, her estranged father's return, the money she withdrew, the internet searches about disappearing. To them, the pieces didn't spell murder. They spelled escape. The trial dragged for 8 exhausting months. The courtroom air was heavy, charged with the ghosts of what everyone wanted to believe but couldn't prove. Lydia sat through every session, clutching a small framed photo of her daughter, refusing to look away. When the verdict finally came, the room fell into silence. Ryan Matthews was found not guilty, lack of evidence, reasonable doubt. The words sliced through Lydia's heart like glass. She collapsed in tears as Ryan's family embraced him. Outside, public anger boiled over. Protesters lined the courthouse steps, chanting Emily's name. Talk shows and documentaries reignited the debate. Was he a wronged man, or a clever one who got away? Social media exploded in outrage. Hashtags demanding justice trended again. But legally, it was over. The man many believed guilty walked free. Still, something about it refused to stay buried. Detective Rees, though retired now, never stopped reading the reports, never stopped tracing what little new information surfaced. Then, in early 2024, a report came through from the US-Canada border at Vermont. A woman matching Emily's description, same height, same eye color, even a faint scar on the left wrist, was flagged by an immigration officer using what appeared to be falsified documents. Before the officer could verify her identity, the woman disappeared into a taxi and was gone. The CCTV footage was grainy, but what unsettled everyone wasn't the resemblance, it was what she was carrying. In her hand, just visible under her sleeve, was a silver locket. When the image was shown to Lydia, she froze. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, "That's hers. I'd know it anywhere." The case was reopened once more, now tangled in more uncertainty than ever. Had Emily truly escaped her life and started anew? Was she running from Ryan, her father, or something else entirely? No one could say for sure. Today, the Toronto police officially list the case as open. The file sits thick with theories and dead ends, a reminder that some stories never close neatly. Somewhere between love and fear, between truth and silence, Emily Donovan vanished. And whether she's alive out there or forever lost beneath the water, one thing remains certain: someone out there still knows what really happened that morning. Someone who has lived 3 years with the truth buried just deep enough to breathe. The years passed, but Emily Donovan's name never truly faded. Every so often, it would reappear, on a late-night podcast, in an Unsolved Cases forum, or whispered among locals near Lake Ontario. People still remembered the wide-eyed woman who vanished days before her wedding, and the man who walked free despite the shadows of suspicion. Ryan Matthews had moved away from the town months after the trial, selling his house quietly and starting over somewhere no one would recognize him. But wherever he went, the ghost of Emily followed. Some said he looked thinner, haunted. Others said he barely spoke about her, as if the weight of her name could still destroy him. Lydia, on the other hand, never stopped. Her sister's disappearance became her life's work. She gathered every scrap of evidence, chased every rumor, and kept a small corkboard in her apartment lined with faded photos, maps, and timelines. Some nights she would stare at Emily's smiling face until dawn, wondering if her sister was out there somewhere, alive but afraid, or gone in a way too cruel to imagine. There was something unsettling about how the world moved on. New crimes filled the headlines, new faces took over the news, and yet, for those who had known Emily, the silence left behind was unbearable. People began to question themselves, question their memories. Was she truly happy before she vanished? Had they missed signs? Her friends replayed their last conversations over and over. Her mother once said she dreamed of Emily standing by the lake, whispering something she couldn't quite hear. Others dismissed it as grief's trick, but Lydia wrote it down anyway, adding it to her file. Then came that sighting, the one in Vermont. A woman resembling Emily, carrying falsified papers, crossing into another life. The image was blurry, the details uncertain, but for Lydia it was enough to keep her hope alive. If Emily had faked her death, if she had run from something, maybe there was still a truth buried beneath all the lies. But if she hadn't, if that woman wasn't her, then someone had gotten away with the perfect crime. Either way, the questions never stopped. Was Emily a victim? Or an architect of her own disappearance? Did she uncover something about Ryan that terrified her, or was she escaping from something no one else could see? Maybe love wasn't the only thing that bound them. Maybe there were secrets, debts, pressures hidden beneath the surface of their perfect life. It's easy to look back and pick apart the warning signs, but in the moment, no one sees them for what they are. That's the cruel part about truth, it hides in plain sight, waiting until it's too late to make sense. Even now, her story feels unfinished. Every year, a small group gathers by the dock where her phone was found. They bring candles, photos, sometimes flowers. Lydia always comes, standing by the water as the wind shifts, whispering her sister's name like a prayer. Some say they've seen her cry, others say she never does. But her eyes, those who've looked close enough, carry a quiet rage. Not at Ryan, not even at Emily, but at the endless uncertainty. Because closure never came, and maybe never will. Maybe that's what makes Emily's story so haunting. Not the mystery itself, but what it reveals about us, the things we choose not to see, the people we think we understand. How well do we really know the ones closest to us? The ones we love, trust, sleep beside? What happens when that trust cracks open, when love turns into something darker, something that consumes rather than comforts? Some say Emily's case teaches a lesson about secrets and silence. Others say it's about the fragility of truth, and how easily it bends under fear. But maybe, it's simpler than that. Maybe it's a reminder that people can live entire lives behind masks so convincing, even those who love them most can't tell what's real anymore. And so, the lake remains quiet, holding its secrets beneath the still surface. Lydia still searches, Ryan still hides, and the world still wonders. Somewhere, perhaps, Emily Donovan lives under another name, watching from afar as her story fades into legend. Or maybe the lake already knows the truth, resting with it in the cold, dark silence beneath. Whatever the case, one thing is certain, love, fear, and secrecy can twist together until they're impossible to separate. And once they do, there's no telling where one ends and the other begins. The night air around Lake Ontario felt colder than usual that evening. A few dozen people gathered near the west dock, each holding a candle that flickered weakly against the wind. The soft glow stretched across the water, reflecting like broken stars. There were no speeches, no cameras this time, just quiet murmurs, the kind that come from people who have carried grief for too long. Lydia stood near the front, her coat buttoned high, her fingers trembling slightly as she lit her candle. She didn't say much, just whispered a few words to the dark water before stepping back. Around her, others followed, placing flowers, letters, and small framed photos along the wooden rail. The air smelled faintly of smoke and lake salt. Somewhere among the crowd, a young girl asked her mother who Emily was. The woman bent down and said softly, "Someone who disappeared before her story was finished." The girl looked toward the lake, her candlelight catching the tears on her mother's face. No one knew how to answer that question anymore. Was Emily gone, or simply lost in the world under a different name? Even after all the police reports, interviews, theories, and years, the truth never came home. As the candles began to burn low, Lydia looked out across the still water. For a moment, she thought she saw a faint movement, like a ripple that didn't belong. Her heart quickened, but when she blinked, it was gone. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe something else. Either way, she stayed there long after everyone had left, her single candle still burning, its light small but stubborn against the night. When the clock struck midnight, a cold gust swept across the dock and snuffed out the last of the flames. The darkness returned, thick and heavy, wrapping the lake once again in silence. And as it did, a simple truth lingered in the air: the hardest part isn't losing someone, it's not knowing why they're gone. If you have any information about the disappearance of Emily Donovan, please contact the Toronto Police Services. Every lead, no matter how small, could help bring closure to a family that's waited far too long. And if you're drawn to stories that explore the human side of crime, the fear, the secrets, and the questions that never stop, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because next week, we'll uncover another case that proves some mysteries don't stay buried forever.